To create operators in Touch Designer, we can double-click the network or use the Tab key. We open up the Op Create dialog, and under here we have these tabs which we can select different operator families. So we have, for example, the option to turn off expert operators and turn them on. We can select Comp, which stands for components, these are a dark grey. We can select Tops, which stands for texture operators, these are purple. We have Chops, which stands for channel operators, these are a dark green. We have SOPs, which stands for surface operators, which are blue. And then we have MATs, which stands for materials, and DATs, which stands for data operators. So we can double click the network and we can bring up our Op Create dialog, and we can select the Comp tab. So on the left hand side here we have all of our 3D objects, such as, for example, cameras, we have geometry, we have lights, etc. So we use these for any sort of 3D sort of objects and modifying things in 3D. Then we have in the middle column our panel components, so this will allow us to build buttons and sliders and text fields and so on. This will allow us to build control panels. So we then have on the right, we have our sort of special components for certain tasks, such as, for example, the animation component will allow us to do keyframed animation. We have the time component for creating separate timelines, and we have the window component to show viewers in different windows. Tops or texture operators are the next family we're going to look at. So these will allow us to do sort of compositing. We can use them for 2D, bringing movies in, etc., and working with ramps and so on. So if we bring in a movie, we can see that that's a dark purple, and we have things like the level, which is a light purple. So we could lay down one, which is a generator, so the dark purple, which is a movie in, or say a colour or something, that would be a generator, as we're generating or bringing in some image. So we've brought in the default image there. And then we have a filter, such as, for example, a level, which requires an input, and it will then modify that input. So if we wire the movie into the level, then we can see that this level will be able to change the movie and filter it. Chops are channel operators which will allow us to create sort of animation channels. We can create audio waves, we can work with oscillators, MIDI in, etc. So we have a lot of different channels which we can generate using different types of data. So we have the dark nodes again and the light nodes. These again are generators and filters. So we could, for example, use a generator such as an audio in to bring audio into our scene there. So we have our audio in is in our network, and then we can right click the output of audio in, which will allow us to bring up the Op Create dialog too, and this will then bring up the Op Create dialog, and we can choose a analyze, for example, and that would then filter this audio data. So we've then just resampled and we have a maximum value there. SOPs or surface operators will allow us to work with our 3D geometry. So we can use generators to create sort of, for example, lines or circles or so on, and then we can use the filters to extrude. We can change any sort of properties. We can like make particle systems, for example. So if we wanted to, we can come back to the components, and here we have a geometry component. And I mentioned that these were 3D objects, so these are going to work with SOPs. So if we create a geometry component and then inside we can use SOPs to create our geometry. So here we have a torus. So if I go to my SOPs, we can see the torus is a generator. And if we wanted to filter this torus, then we could choose a filter such as noise, for example. So if I then right click the output of the torus and then lay down a noise SOP, then what we'll see is that our torus has now been filtered to have a lot of noise applied, and it's moving around in 3D space. We can make the viewer active by clicking that icon and then moving around with the left mouse held down. We can right click and choose model geometry to open up a basic geometry editor. So if we do this on the torus, then we can see there that we have our geometry in the editor. Mats or materials will allow us to apply materials to our geometry. So we have constant, we have depth, we have Phong, we have wireframe. So we don't really have that many mats here, but we can work with this Phong and we can change its name to, say, material 1. And then we can bring some geometry in to apply it to. So if we double click, we can again use the components, we can use the geometry component. If we just let go, then we can see that we have the geometry there. We can change the material to a red and we'll see that it's not applied to our geometry right now. So we can see the display, under the display tab of the geometry's parameter window, we can see that we have material is set to Phong 1. So if we drag material 1, we can click and then drag that up to the display. So if I just drag, then we can see a plus appear. We can let go, and once we've let go, we'll notice that that material has now been connected to the geometry, and we can see the dotted reference line. DATs or data operators will allow us to create any sort of text or numerical data in Touch Designer. So we can create tables, we can hold text files, we can have MIDI in and OSE, XML, we can bring in our scripts and we can use scripts with our DAT. So if we first of all lay down a generator DAT, then we could find, for example, a file in, and we could lay this down and we could see that we can bring in a table. So if I bring in a file in, and we have a little error there, it's because I haven't chosen a file. So if I choose with the plus here in the parameters window the file which I want, which is this table, and if I select it, then we have this name and age with all the different data coming in there. So this is just a standard tab delimited text file which I've brought in. We can then filter it by using a select, for example, and we could extract columns by index, which would allow us to then choose which table or which column we want in our table rather, and then we can see that we can just have the names and no age. So if we wanted to, we could also create scripts. So we could lay down a text DAT, we could make its viewer active, which means we'll now be able to type inside this DAT. So if we make the viewer active and click inside, we can see that we can type. So if we type in status hello world, then this is just going to send hello world to our status bar. So if we right click up here, that's the status bar up there, if we right click we can click run script, and we'll see that we have hello world at the top right in our status bar.